Welcome back to another episode of the Meaningful... I'm not saying it at the same time.
It's so much fun, though.
No, Meaningful People Podcast, guys. Welcome back to another episode. We're so happy to have you listening to this episode. We had an amazing guest. Her name was...
And is... Zahava Farbman. She is the Associate Director of Crisis Intervention, Trauma and Bereavement Services of Chai Lifeline's Project Chai. This was such a powerful and emotional episode. I held myself back from crying multiple times.
And you know what? So did she.
Yeah.
She got very emotional during this conversation multiple times. This is somebody who we sat down with that deals with... I consider her like a firefighter. When everyone's like running out, she's running in. And she's dealing with trauma, the mental side, you know, the pachad that people have.
The emotions.
She's untangling wires that people just don't think could be untangled. And she does such amazing holy work. And what she does and what her department does is so very necessary. And this episode, I think... by listening to it alone, you'll gain so much just knowledge.
Yeah, it's unfortunately you'll see it. She mentions everyone has to deal with trauma, and she mentions certain tools and experiences and how to handle certain situations. And guys, just continue listening. It's gonna be a wild ride. Welcome to the Meaningful People Podcast, the podcast where we talk to people who are
meaningful.
Yeah, that sounds good. Here we are with Mrs. Zahava Farbman from the Five Towns. Originally from the Five Towns, or?
Not at all.
Where are you from originally?
So I grew up in Pitsburg, Pennsylvania.
Oh.
Until high school. And then I lived in Teaneck, New Jersey. And we got married. We lived in Queens for a whole bunch of years, and then Woodmere.
Oh, I feel like no one's originally from the Five Towns, by the way. Like, why even ask that, right?
Yeah, it's true.
Never ever thought I'd end up here, but here we are. Very happy, thank God.
Do you think, I asked Manny Friedman, because he's also not from New York, do you see yourself as a Pittsburgh girl, Pittsburgh person? Or
actually, in many ways, I feel like growing up there, I mean, until high school is really growing up there, I really feel that it helped shape me. It helped make me into who I am. So, yeah.
In what way?
So first of all, I do need to add the caveat. I was the rabbi's daughter, the principal's daughter, in an out-of-town community. So I saw a lot. I experienced a lot. My parents really helped build the community, into a beautiful, thriving Jewish community. So there were all types of Jews in my house, all types of, people from, outside of Pittsburgh would come and stay in my house. My father converted people. My father married people. And, a big difference in growing up in a community like that. I mean, New York is wonderful, but everyone is good. You know what I'm saying? Like, all types of Jews are good. And, I really feel like that helped to shape me. And, it really... I think, quite obviously went into my work. My mother and a close friend started the first Jewish organization in Pittsburgh. Transplants started in Pittsburgh. So people would come from all over the world, Jewish people, to get transplants, and they stayed in my house. They made an apartment in my basement. And it was my first exposure as a kid to Jewish patients, sick people. There were people who died. And it was a real, education as a kid.
So even from a young age, you were experienced with, I guess,
trauma,
sort of trauma type of situations.
Yeah. Chesed, illness, death, trauma. Yeah.
And that directly brought you to what you're involved with now, you think?
So I guess so. You know what I'm saying? I don't know, but it definitely, I feel that the whole Pittsburgh experience definitely helped shaped me and mold me.
So in between then to now, where you were part of I know now you're still involved with Chai Lifeline, but even before, way back, you're involved with Camp Simcha as well.
So I've been working for Chai Lifeline. This summer will be 23 years.
Oh my gosh. And Nachi's, how old are you, Nachi?
Oh, please, yeah. How old are you?
I'm 4 years older than Nachi. I make it like I'm the oldest person in the world.
Right.
Wow. So you're a part of Chai Lifeline family for a very long time.
Very long time.
How did you get connected to Chai Lifeline?
So I worked in Camp Simcha as a counselor my summer after seminary. And I got married young, so I didn't go back. But I worked in OHEL right when I got married, when I was in social work school. And then I heard about a job as a program director. And I worked there my first summer. And then I started right away as the assistant camp director. And I was the only one working in camp full time. I worked on camp during the year. And I interacted with the families and the counselors and, networking with families throughout the year and, just a lot of the camp stuff during the year. And unfortunately, when campers died, I was the one that interacted with the staff. So I did that for about 8 years. And then, of course, I was in camp all summer. I started in Camp Simcha when it was 1 2-week program. And I was there, as it grew into 2 2-week programs. And then Camp Simcha Special started and it became a 10-week summer.
You're there by like its origins.
Yes. Yeah, really. I watched it grow.
And something, it's interesting that, I had the experience of being there the past few years, but just with science, Baruch Hashem, not too many people, it's very unfortunate, but the number of people passing away in Camp Simcha, I know drastically went down, but back then there were people that passed away very often. No, it's like people now in Camp Simcha, oh yeah, it's fine, yeah, it happens here and there, but back then it was a different story from what I hear.
Well, childhood cancer has changed over the years.
Right.
I remember my summer as a counselor. The first child's dying after the summer. I remember, how much it affected me. And it wasn't even a camper that I was close with. But yeah, it's definitely changed over the years. So I spent about 8 summers in Camp Simcha doing that, in that position. And then thank God, my family grew and it came to a point where it was like, either my family or Camp Simcha, and somehow my family, my family won. But, I'm the type of person, I still wanted to work, part-time. And I came to Rabbi Scholar and I said, I'm I very much am attached to Chai Lifeline. So before I look elsewhere, and at the time he was, starting the crisis intervention trauma and bereavement department. Because, in order to respond to Chai Lifeline families who were unfortunately losing their children to illness. So he said, stay on and, come to this department. And for me, it was really a natural transition because, as I said, I was doing a lot of that work informally in camp, with the families, with the staff members when a camper died. So it started as something, very part-time, really just with Chai Lifeline families. Over the last, 15 years has grown exponentially, fortunately, but unfortunately.
Right.
And we respond to every type of crisis, trauma, tragedy, illness, sudden, locally, nationally, and internationally.
Is there, stepping back to the Camp Simcha stuff you dealt with, and it definitely applies to now, is there some sort of training that you had to go through, or was it just all natural?
So I am a social worker. I went to, graduated with an MSW many, many years ago. And now, more recently, I went back to school for my PhD with a focus in grief and trauma. I have yet to write my dissertation. I don't know if that will ever happen. But to answer your question, I really learned everything on the job.
A little bit of experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, when I was in social work school 25, 26 years ago, they really did not have, a lot of classes in trauma and crisis. Now they really do. Now they have a lot more classes in trauma and crisis and death. I think, after 9/11.
Do you think it wasn't dealt with then? Maybe trauma wasn't exactly...
So the world of trauma, they really learned a lot through wars and through, different areas. This isn't a, history and trauma and crisis conversation. But I think after 9/11, the social worker world, the psychology world really saw how much trauma affects people, on a day-to-day basis, short-term, long-term. And I think that they really realized, that they need to bring it more into, education and psychoeducation and, first aid, first aid type of things. And I think that's when they really brought it more into the classrooms and,
So I want to discuss the type of, I guess, traumas or experiences that you and I guess your team deal with. Well, first of all, what's that like to just go into? I'm sure every experience
You're
is
like a firefighter.
Well, first of all, can I just answer the team part?
Yeah, totally.
The High Lifeline team is, we're 3 people who work full time, but over the years, we've trained hundreds and hundreds of volunteers nationally. We've done a lot of trainings in different cities and internationally, actually. We've done all over the world different trainings. And that's, really brought our department to a whole different level. Because it just got to a point where, again, unfortunately, Hashem Yerachem, we couldn't be everywhere, and it actually started, our team started in the Hasidic world because they, really preferred where people, that were more similar to them would come and help them.
As opposed to a non-Jew?
No, as opposed to
non-Hasidic.
Oh, okay, got it.
So we started doing trainings in the Hasidic world, it was extremely, extremely successful. And then over time, unfortunately, there were more tragedies and we just couldn't be everywhere. So we started doing trainings in other communities and other cities and nationally and internationally. And, by now we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of volunteers in different locales, again, locally, nationally, and internationally. So that's the team.
I'm just imagining, to me, I feel like obviously what you're doing is extremely important, but I feel like, I think a lot of listeners as well think you probably have the worst job in the world. Like there's a crazy thing that happens, whether, I don't even know that, you could give me a list of the types of traumas you guys deal with, and you're the person who goes in there to help them emotionally. So
I want to say that at the outset, because I think that's important. I really look at my job not as a job. Mm-hmm. I really need to say that. I really think that I really feel every day, and I it sounds weird, but I thank Hashem for this chus. I really see my work as the biggest avodas hakodesh. I really I call Rabbi Scholar every Erev Rosh Hashanah. I see Erev Rosh Hashanah as a time to, give Hakar Satov to different people, right? We may all make our Erev Rosh Hashanah phone calls. And I call him Erev Rosh Hashanah really just to thank him for the opportunity of facilitating, my work and my Avodas HaKodesh. And he said to me one year that, Hashem is giving me the opportunity now to wipe his children's tears until the time that he is able to do so.
Wow.
And that's what I really feel, and, I feel, I daven every day to be a worthy shaliach of Hashem, and I daven every day to be able to take care of his children, and, and that's how I see it. I really don't see it as a job.
So what are the type of traumas that you deal with? And I know the list is long, so just a summary of all the...
So it's really all types, like it's all encompassing. So it's deaths from illness, and that can include, when it comes to illness, pre-bereavement, preparing.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's sudden. It could be car accidents, fires, just somebody, dropping dead from, a heart attack or, anything else. It could be natural disasters, hurricanes, floods, think of some of the things that we've dealt with, across our country in the last few years. It could be terrorist attacks, homicides, suicides. What else? Coronaviruses.
Right. We'll get into that.
So you mentioned a long list of traumas that you deal with, which is pretty much all trauma, and there's a question we ask a lot of our guests that we have on that this is applicable for. But how do you stay sharp? How do you not burn out? How do you wake up every day or whatever? It might not be every day, but that phone call comes in and it's even more heartbreaking than the one yesterday and the one before and the one before. What keeps you going?
So that's, an excellent question, and the question that I get asked most of. And I think the answer to that question is what I just said. The fact that I don't look at it as a job. I think that if I did look at it as a job, I think I would have gotten burnt out a long time ago. I think the fact that I really do look at it as a schus, and I really do look at it as like as a avodas hakodesh, and I really do see it as as I'm taking care of Hashem's children for Him.
Right, but I mean it's still hard.
Yeah, no,
it still probably takes a toll.
100%. At the same time, it is hard, and my heart does break every time another Jew is in pain, and I will tell you that the day that it doesn't hurt is the day that I quit my job.
Right. You feeling is probably what makes you as effective as you are when what you do.
So. But my answer really is that if I didn't have my emunah, if I didn't believe in God, then I would not be able to do what I do.
So let's say, you got a phone call and it's a bad situation. You have to walk in. Is there like by the book, is there like a secret magic that you're going into?
She's shaking her head no.
Yeah.
Right.
Really.
I'm going to answer, but right away is no.
No secret sauce. Okay.
No. Every situation is different.
Is there a cure to trauma?
No. First, to answer your first question, every situation is different. And even when I do trainings, for volunteers, yes, we have a standard training, you know what I'm saying? But I also train them, like, if you walk into a situation, like in your head, okay, I know what I'm going to say, and this one is like that one, then please don't be my volunteer. You know what I'm saying? Because every single situation is different. Every family is different. And even if it's like, okay, this 60-year-old man was just killed in a car accident. And last week I dealt with a 60-year-old man, who was killed in a car accident. But no two families are alike. No two personalities are alike. No one's going to react the same way. And, there's no standard script. Never. Whenever, I've been doing this now, almost 20 years, and I never know what I'm going to say when I walk into a situation. Never. Hashem like every single time, Hashem just put the right words in my mouth. So no, there's no two situations that are ever the same.
For you personally, is there a specific type of trauma that whenever you hear that type of thing, you're like, it's a little harder for you than the others, that sticks out, that it's more difficult to deal with for you?
They're all hard. You know what I'm saying? Whenever someone is hurting, it's hard. I guess I'm going to say, I'm a mother. So whenever it's a parent, involving the loss of a child,
maybe it's harder because, like you said, you're a mother, so you could tap into that feeling even stronger than a different type of scenario.
And when you say that, like, I'm thinking, I'm trying to put myself in this conversation. I don't know, how do you like, I'm just thinking, what words can you possibly say to somebody, you know, and for anyone listening who's experienced something, you know, what words can you possibly say to somebody that experienced such trauma that could make it a little bit easier? So
very often it's not about what words I say. It's, first of all, sometimes it's just my presence. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's just about knowing that somebody is there that has the experience and the wherewithal to just help carry this very heavy load that was put onto our shoulders. You know what I mean?
Right.
And sometimes it's just, more times than not, and if it's one message, you know, I would give, it's just about validation. Like, that's, you know, the most important thing that I do and that anybody could do for somebody going through a trauma. It's just about validating feelings.
I was gonna ask for those listening who have a friend, or especially this, you know, when we're recording this podcast, this period of time is hopefully post Corona, but towards the end of Corona, you know, what could someone wants to know? They're going to a Shiva house, or they're about to text their friend, you know, who lost somebody. You know, what is the thing to say? What is not the thing to say? Okay,
so the first and most important thing that you could do for somebody who's going through any type of crisis, trauma, or tragedy is validation. Validation, validation, validation. And what does that mean? I'll tell you by example. Okay. During this Corona period, so I got several calls from several different, you know, community members, family, you know, friends, regarding a 16, 17-year-old girl who lost her father very suddenly from Corona. He was sick for just about a week or so, and he died. And everyone was just very concerned about her, you know, reaction. And she was crying uncontrollably, and she was just so upset, you know, etc. So I got on the phone with her, and I listened to her, and we spoke for a while. And she was really upset about her father dying. But you know what? She's allowed to be,
right?
You know? And I validated her feelings, and I gave her permission to be upset, and I gave her permission to be crying hysterically, and I gave her permission to not have a full appetite, or whatever it was that she was doing. And, you know, the people around her, it was very hard for them to see her in pain. Right? And all they wanted to do was take away her pain. And all they wanted to say to me was like, no, but she's so, you know, she's so sad, and she's crying so much, and she's allowed to
Can't take away the pain. So if you try to solve it, you make it worse, you're saying.
Right. So we, you know, we just need to validate people's feelings. It's not about don't be sad, don't be scared, you know, don't be angry, don't, you know. We need to just validate people's feelings, giving them space and permission and opportunity to express and, you know, process and go through their experience in whatever way that they need to. It's not about the way that you think you would go through this experience. It's about the way that they need to go through this experience.
I want to touch on coronavirus a little more, but I actually, just as you're talking, I have a question. I have a funny friend, and he has a whole bit about how he planned out, he's an interesting type of guy, but he planned out all the people he knows and loves dying, and if there's a Shiva, how he's going to have to sit Shiva. Would you say that's a good idea, or is that like too dark of a place, or should we...
That's like dark black. That's like...
No, when he was saying it to me, it was funny, but he was saying like, yeah, you got to like kind of prepare yourself for, obviously you can never know, but put yourself in a situation that everything you know could really change the next day. Would you say that's a good idea, or that's... So
I think that this, you know, coronavirus that we just went through, you know, probably made everyone's mind wander to a certain extent, and I guess some people's mind will wander more than others.
Right.
By the way, this guy told me like 3 years ago. Not related.
Okay.
To Corona.
3 years ago, I don't know. That might be a little extreme, but
So would you say it's kind of, it's good in a way to kind of anticipate like what bad could come to people, because it's so unexpected. He's making faces at me.
What do you think, Yaakov?
I personally think it is a good idea to like maybe not get there, like have to plan out like where you're sitting by Shiva, but to imagine like the world that you're living could drastically change the next day, and you got to think of like, what would my life be without that person or that person? Is that too crazy? I don't know.
So on the one hand, like we're all supposed to live our lives as if it's the last day, because you would think that makes us live, life,
full,
better. But on the other hand, I kind of think that we're supposed to live life like with emuna and simcha,
right?
Feeling like it's going to be good, So
yeah,
I don't know.
You're saying it's a good balance, There's.
I don't think that's what she's saying.
No, that's what I'm saying.
I'm thinking more on the balance of like emuna and simcha and positivity.
Right. Okay. Got it. Okay. I'm gonna tell this guy everyone's gonna be okay.
Yeah.
But in regards to coronavirus, I'm sure you, like many organizations or just dealing with people, a lot of things have shifted, and you've gotten probably tons of phone calls and a lot busier.
It's been unprecedented. It's just, what can I tell you? People say to me like, oh, but you do this all the time. No, I deal with death like here and there. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Like, I don't have a schedule. I never know when like a death or a tragedy is going to happen. And sometimes they're busier than others. But during the coronavirus, the amount of deaths that I was dealing with, that my department, were dealing with every single day was just unbelievable. It was just unbelievable.
Do you ever like, it's touching on before, do you ever like cry from having to deal with so much of this?
Yes.
That's hard.
It's okay to cry, I guess.
No, like you said before, but like yeah.
This coronavirus period is obviously going to be in history books one day. And the fact that we lived through this is, crazy. But the position that you had during this is like, almost like it's like a garbage man almost. It's like you have to really, you're dealing with complex issues.
The garbage man, at the end of the day, you put your stuff, down,
everyone's
and then you go home. This
garbage
comes
has
home
pension,
with you.
and they have great benefits.
But that's a very important point. That's a very, very important point, that everybody was going through this crisis. No matter what job we had, no matter what position we had, no matter what financial place we were in, no matter how old we were, no matter, what I'm saying? We were all going through this crisis.
Did that make it easier for the people that were suffering?
So for example, like my department has a crisis hotline. Always, it runs 24 hours, 6 days a week. And you
want to say the number now?
8553-CRISIS, 8553-CRISIS, or crisis@lifeline.org.
Okay.
So, at certain times we will, usually it's, we have a few people manning it, but at certain times, like at certain, God forbid, if there's a crisis going on in the community, we'll put more people on it, So in the beginning of the coronavirus, we put many more people, manning the line. So after a week or so, I don't remember how long, the volunteers that we had manning the hotline said to us, like, could we just get together? Could we have a Zoom, a conference call? Like, we just need to and one of the things they said to us was, this is the first time that those of us answering the crisis hotline are going through the same crisis of the people calling the crisis hotline.
Wow.
Like
the first responders were also the victims.
Yeah, Hatzolah said the same thing.
Right.
I did phone calls for, Zoom calls for Hatzolah.
Which you do Hatzolah work
yes,
also?
Yes, I'm
again.
the mental health responder for Hatzolah here in the 5 towns in Rockaway. So, they said the same thing. The Hatzolah guys, Hatzolah wives, what I'm saying? Like, everyone was going through the same crisis. So for myself as well, do you know what I'm saying? Like, usually I come home from a tragedy I come home, I close the door. Yes, of course, I'm sad, and I always take it home with me. It's in my heart, it's in my soul. But like, I hug my kids, I distract, or I this, or I that. Sometimes it stays with me till like Friday night. I light my candles, I cry, or I watch my husband bench the kids. I cry, whatever it is. It comes. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. But like here, like there's no escape. You know what I mean? Like it's all consuming. So that was like a very very big piece. Yeah. From
a Torah perspective, what, and from your experience, what do you think we could take out of coronavirus?
Rak Hashem. Rak Hashem. I think.
ROCK or Ray?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah. Dwayne The Rock Johnson and Hashem. Those two.
Interesting. But
Rak Reish Kof Hashem.
Right. I think, I don't pretend to know anything. I don't pretend to know why Hashem sent us this, but I do believe that one underlying message is just that we are not in control of anything. Anything. It is, Tzrak Hashem.
Wow. We had Tzvi Gluck in here a few weeks ago. It's not, I want to say it's a similar conversation, but they both are dealing with a lot and on the front lines a lot. And I don't know. I just sit here and hear the things you're saying and try to put myself in your shoes. And I think a lot of the listeners might be doing that as well. It's just really hard. You come home, and does coming home to your kids and to your family, having dealt with what you dealt with, make you maybe more of a loving mother, more of a grateful person at the end of the day? Because you ultimately, every time you go out on a call, it's like a reality. It's like, you don't take things for granted as much, probably.
I hope so. I can only hope so. I can only hope so. I like to think that it helps to keep my life in perspective. I definitely think that it adds to my family in the sense that my kids are very aware of what I do and what I'm involved with. Obviously not details and, et cetera. But certainly, they know, they're very, very aware of what I do. And I hope that I like to think that it makes them more sensitive. And, my older kids are, already involved in helping people and doing things for the community. And I think, it definitely just gives me a better awareness.
Is there a feel-good experience or moments that happened for you? Because obviously you deal with a lot of the sadness and the grief, but are there ever moments that you're like, and I don't know if it's a breakthrough with a person or just at the end of the whole case that you, like, it's a feel-good, happy moment?
I mean, definitely when people share nachas with me, share simchas with me, will tell me, something that I said to them during the, lowest moments of pain, stuck with them and meant a lot to them and kept giving them chizuk and strength. Obviously that means a tremendous amount to me. Thank God now I've been doing a lot of speaking and presentations, and people will respond with positive feedback and tell me that certain things I said helped get them through different parts of the crisis, and that's it means a lot. Also, I feel like in this work, I don't know, it's weird, but like when you don't hear negative feedback, saying, then it's positive.
Right. That's true. Like people are moving on, they're healing.
Right.
They don't need you anymore.
Well, I'll tell you that, for those who know me personally, they know that my family went through something last year where we lost our brother-in-law suddenly. And I know that how grateful my sister is for the work you've done, and just my family seeing you there during Shiva and being there for our nephews, for our nieces, was it was the biggest nachama probably. And talk about positive feedback. You know, if you ever think for a second if the work you're doing, you know, it made a huge difference for my family at least. So that's just want to give you that positive feedback. Yaakov, next.
Alki and I are going to write a book together.
Oh, yeah.
That's nice. I have a friend.
Thank you.
I have a friend. That's amazing. I have a friend who he runs Meaningful Minute, and he lost a brother-in-law, and you helped them. So thank you very much.
So, you know, Yaakov Linger, he likes to joke about everything.
I mean, this is a very serious conversation, but I like adding a little, for sure. Jokes and joy to it. I'm sure there are instances where you have to go back to a family for another trauma, another case. I'm sure even more than twice sometimes on a crazy scenario. What's that like? Is that different? Is it the same thing, or is it deeper?
So, there's unfortunately, there's a family actually in our neighborhood who lost 2 children, you know, many years apart from each other, and had an opportunity last year in Israel. I'm close with them, and I was with them meaning with the family, you know, through both experiences, both losses. And I was in Israel last year, and I went to Har Menuchos, and it was the first time I saw both the kfarim, and it was like totally overwhelming. And for me, you know, you asked me before about crying. I cried at those 2 kfarim, crying like, for me, those 2 kfarim represented like the kfarim of like all the kids in the last 20 years. It was something unbelievable. Yeah, families who go through multiple losses is, you know, on a totally different level. Totally different level.
For somebody listening now who's perhaps going through a trauma or a loss, is there something that you can say to them?
I can, you know, like we say, al regal achas, I can just validate. I, you know, like I said earlier, I think that is the biggest gift that we can give anybody going through anything, is just to validate whatever it is.
Could you we did this with Tzvi Luck, and I know you don't know this specific case because you're maybe talking to a few people now. Could you talk to them? I know it's going to be a little general, but like, could you try
as if they're sitting in front of you?
Yeah.
So, I just want to give you permission to feel and think and cope and react in any way that you need to, because this is your loss and it's your grief, and nobody can tell you how to do it. And I want to tell you that Viktor Frankl was a famous psychiatrist. He himself lived through Auschwitz, and he coined the phrase. He said, an abnormal reaction to an abnormal situation is totally normal. Okay? Again, an abnormal reaction to an abnormal situation is totally normal, which means you need to do this however you need to do it. Of course, there are red flags, something we don't need to get into right now, but I want you just to feel however you need to feel. And don't worry about all the people around you. They care about you so much. It's just so hard for them to see you in pain. That's why I came today. Just to introduce myself and to give you permission to go through this grief process however you need to go through it. And I'll come back and we'll have plenty of time to discuss everything else. But just for right now, this is your pain. You need to go through it, not around it, not on top of it, not underneath it. and I'll be here with you and we'll get through it together.
I recall with my sister, there was an important point just for me being around at that time that you were driving home was you need to feel right now. You know, a lot of people are trying to offer, well, if you do this, maybe you won't feel it as much. If you do that, you won't feel it as much. And everyone means well. Exactly. But you were very into that if you don't feel now, it might creep up. You know, you need to go through it head on. How important is that?
And you talk about something that Malki wrote an article about that months and months later about that conversation. And that made me feel, I mean, it's all Hashem, but that made me feel really good. She remembered that conversation. She quoted that conversation in an article. And she said, you know, at the time, you know, she wasn't sure, she was weary, but she took my advice and how much, you know, she appreciated, you know, following that advice. And even though it may have been hard, those feelings were hard to go through, but she needed to feel, and she needed to go through those feelings. She needed to go through that pain.
How important is that? And, you know, you're basically telling somebody that you're losing a limb, but you need to go through the worst of it, and you're not going to get, you know, the painkillers, and you're not going to get the morphine. You just need to feel it at its worst. And how important is that for someone who is going through that trauma to feel it as hard as possible?
Yeah, no, it's I don't want to say it's the most important thing, but it's so important because there are others around, you know, who, like I said earlier, it's so hard for, you know, loved ones and friends to see this person in pain, and they want to, you know, they want to take away the pain. All they want to do is take away the pain, and they can't understand why going through this pain right now is so important. You know, part of my job is to help people see long term. You know, short term, is it better to, you know, to not feel the pain?
To numb it.
You know, short term, to numb it. Thank you. Yeah, short term, for now, she'll feel better for 5 minutes. Great. But long term, the pain is going to come back and it's going to feel worse. So, you know, more important to hold her hand, you know, through the pain rather than, you know, than numb it for now.
Wow. That was super heavy. When we interviewed Benny Friedman, Benny said something, Nachi's like, heavy. I'm like, Nachi, that's not heavy.
Yeah.
This is heavy.
I said that after the Tzvi interview. I don't know what I was thinking.
So you do, you have a way of connecting with people. You have like a WhatsApp chat. Can you tell us a little about that? I think it's a WhatsApp chat.
I try very hard to, you know, I try very hard to connect people to Hashem through whatever it is that they're going through. You know, that's, you asked me earlier, how do I do it? How do I do what I do? And really, that's my coping mechanism. You know, if I didn't have my connection to Hashem and my connection to Torah, everything is in the Torah. All the, you know, the Torah is really the first psychology book. It's not just the first, you know, it's not just a rule book and a history book, but it's the first psychology book. All the emotions we go through, all the feelings we go through, all the experiences we go through are there. And it's become kind of a passion of mine to find, you know, places of validation in the Torah and, you know, personalities in the Torah that have gone through things and using them as places of validation and etc. Anyways, so I have a tremendous chus. There's a yeshiva in Far Rockaway, Yeshiva Ter Shimon, who sends out like 18 daily emails to, I don't know, whatever, 30,000 people. So about...
Who's Rosh Yeshiva for that? That's
Rabbi Gruner.
That's Rabbi Gruner. I thought it was Rabbi Gruner. Oh yeah, he's awesome. Yeah.
So about 2.5 years ago, he asked me to do one for women. So first I was like, no, I do trauma, I do death, I don't do this stuff. But after speaking to, you know, my Rabbanim and whatever, so I feel that everyone is going through something. You know what I'm saying? There's trauma with a big T, there's trauma with a little t. everyone's going through something. So I said yes. So thank God we're about more than 2.5 years later, almost 3 years. Wow.
Yeah, Corona period felt like it felt very long. It also flew by very fast.
Right. Sukkot will be 3 years. And we have about 4,500 women around the world. And it's just a short message every day of some inspiration, some chizuk, combining Torah and whatever, some type of, trauma, whatever, some type of message that people can get through email or WhatsApp. And
do you mind saying the email or WhatsApp so someone listening
I
could?
would love to. Thank you.
People listening obviously finish this episode, but and then do it. But yeah, what is it?
So you can get it through email. You can sign up at soulsisters@aterashimon.org, soulsisters@aterashimon.org, or for WhatsApp, you can text 516-404-7594, 516-404-7594.
It'd be funny if you accidentally gave it's programmed your husband's number. You accidentally that's the number.
Yeah, I was like, there's no way you know it by heart, and then you just rattled it off. So good for you.
Yeah.
Or you can go to the yeshiva's website. It's all there, which is aterashimon.org.
Wow. Okay. Is there any last piece, story, words, yeah. any last thing that you would like to leave us with?
I think I would like to leave you with the following thought. Number one is that we all get through trauma. Trauma is a part of our lives. If you look at the definition for crisis, so crisis is anything that disrupts our normal mode of functioning. And what makes a crisis a trauma? Trauma is anything that we've never experienced before. Trauma is the way we perceive it. And trauma is when our normal coping mechanisms don't work. So we all go through trauma. It's part of, the way Hashem made the world. It's a whole different conversation. But I learned something during the Corona period that really made a difference for me and a difference for a lot of other people. And I guess I'll end with this, because we can spend another hour on, tips and tools to get through trauma, but that's, a whole nother presentation. But I have a tremendous chus of, I teach Bilvavi Mishkan Evna once a week, which is like a very simple but important sefer in terms of connecting to yourself and connecting to Hashem. So during the Corona period, I just did not have the strength to prepare or teach. I just, needless to say, the coronavirus period was a very, very difficult time for me. So one of the lessons that we learned was that the Chafetz Chaim, when he felt spiritually weak, he would go and learn the first few psukim of Bereshis, the story of when Hashem created the world. And why would he do that? Just Bereshis bara Elokim, to remind himself just Yesh Borei Olam, that there's a creator of the world. That's it. He created me, he created this world, and he knows what he's doing. And it was just such a game changer for me. And people called me afterwards and they were like, just that, change my life, change my perspective of the coronavirus, change my perspective on trauma, on difficulties, and I think that's just, something huge to hold on to.
I think it's nice that, a takeaway from that also is that the Chafetz Chaim he also had points where he felt spiritually weak and he had to look deeper. So that's a really nice art.
And I think just moving forward, because I believe that this coronavirus hopefully is over, but I think, when people ask me now, so is your work over? We're dealing now with the aftermath and the ripple effects and the PTSD. And, there's a very fascinating sforno in Parshas Vayera, Perek Tes, Pasuk Yudaled, that
Boom.
Dr. Fox shared with me, my esteemed colleague. And he explained the difference between a Makkah and a Magifa. And it's the parsha with the Eser Makos. And he said that a Magifa, a plague, is when it's objectively over, but the pachad remains. And I believe that that's, the period that we're going to be heading into now. You know what I'm saying? That Be'ezras Hashem, the plague is objectively over, but I believe that we'll be dealing now with, the aftermath and ripple effects.
And we'll end this in a second, but because we touched upon that, so many people listening, maybe a lot of parents, their kids who are scared from this period of time, if it's going to come back, because the kids' lives have been completely turned upside down as well, what can they tell their kids?
That's what it means when it's objectively over, but the pachad remains,
right.
And they're going to be going back to school, and so many people are going to be coming back surrounded by loss, and it's going to be over, but it's not going to be over for a long time. And what should the parents tell them? Is that what you're asking?
What could they tell them?
Fear is a very big part of this coronavirus, and just as an example of some of the things, every single day we say in Az Yashir that the Jews who saw the Egyptians drown were so scared they were shaking. That sometimes we go through situations that are scary. Hashem gets it, but what are we going to do with that fear? How are we going to channel it? When Yitzhak was sitting on the Mizbeach, he was in a state of terror, but he was present in that fear, and he channeled it into gvura, into strength and resilience. And that's why it says pachad and gvura. We have to acknowledge the fear of our kids and validate it, but help them channel it, and help them express it, and help them use their strengths and use their hobbies to be able to take their fears and take their anxieties and channel it into positive emotions. And that's a whole nother presentation.
Yes.
But al regal achas, that's what we do.
Thank you very much for coming in and having this conversation with us. It was definitely awesome.
Thank you. This was a really wonderful opportunity.
Wow, what an episode.
Yeah, and Nachi, you were pretty open.
Yeah, it was definitely a deep conversation, and Zahava Farbman is someone who is making a huge impact in the lives of so many. Everyone goes through some sort of trauma, unfortunately, but her just being there makes it manageable, I guess.
You're literally thanking her honestly after for her help that she did for your family.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people feel the same way for what she does and her department, what they do for so many people. So it was really an honor to have her here, to have this conversation, and to get to know what she has to deal with.
It was pretty crazy. It's so many cringy moments she probably has to deal with. And I know she's not as quote unquote famous as maybe some of our other guests. So people, if you're listening to this and you got up to this point, and if you were moved by this episode as much as we were, please share it with your family and your friends.
I think just simply because of the reason that it'll help people.
It's like she said,
powerful message.
Everyone deals with trauma, and it's a scary thought, but it's definitely helpful to have this knowledge.
Yeah, I loved how she spoke to people who are going through it. And if you like this episode, make sure to share it, leave a review, and stay tuned to what we have coming next.
Yeah. Who should we say?
No, let's leave it.
Okay, guys.
Let's leave it be.
Someone awesome. I mean, they're always awesome people.
So meaningful.
Yeah.